So keeping that in mind, I mean, so you come back to America, you see this tribalism, deeply frustrating. Then I have to ask, what do you even begin to make of this election that we're about 2 weeks away from voting on?
Jeez, I don't even know where. That's another thing that's just. I think there's several factors here. I mean, on an emotional level, I feel it makes me deeply worried and also very angry, and the way I'm responding to that, I have a hard time staying on the sidelines. Like, I'm very polarized. I'm either going to be the dude in Big Lebowski who doesn't give a fuck and will sit down and drink a White Russian, which I'm drinking now, something similar to that, and basically just be withdrawn and not care and enjoy my life. Or I have to be in the fight. I have to really be doing something meaningful. For me, there's no in between. I'm not just going to go out and vote once a year and say, oh, the system's so bad. Like, I'm either going to be... it's one or the other for me. So the one right now I'm trying to kind of fight back. And so my response emotionally is that this represents a fundamental failure, both top-down and bottom-up. At the top-down, it's a deep embedded... It is a very systemic corruption and a kind of corruption at the heart of our system that has to do with the revolving door between elites, money, and political power that become where power is concentrated in fewer and fewer hands at the expense of the majority. And
that is true. I mean, it just got recently announced that AT&T bought Time Warner, which that's just an example of further consolidation and concentration in the world of the telecom industry, and you actually are seeing these incredible monopolies and oligopolies springing up of a lot of the airlines are getting all bought up into the same company and things like that. And you're right, power is being concentrated in
that's a good
fewer
example.
and fewer hands.
It's good to give these examples. Another one is interlocking corporate directorships, where like General Electric could own shares in defense acquisitions or something like that.
Right.
The media being owned by fewer and fewer people.
Yeah, apparently 90% of the television we watch is owned by 6 companies.
Yeah, that's why I think another thing to talk about is this revolution of alternative media and reason-based conversation. And
right.
We were talking about earlier, is getting people with different views to come to the table, humanize each other, sit down across race and ideas, and just fucking bypass the system of polarizing bullshit and really get us talking in a humanizing and smart way and use alternative media to do it. Now, that said, there's a great talk by Lawrence Lessig, TED Talks. Probably the only, there are many TED Talks I like. This is my personal favorite. I actually tear up a little bit at the end because the guy talks about how much he loves his child and how, you do anything for your child. Even if the doctor told you there's almost no chance your child you'll still do everything you can to try to save your child. Yeah. He said we should feel the same way about our republic, where, how much do you love your republic? And Benjamin Franklin, I think, said, someone asked him what kind of system the country was. He said, it's a republic, man, if you can keep it. And our founders didn't expect us to last this long. I don't think. Jefferson certainly, thought we were ultimately, probably not going to last. But that said, he talks about how we have to reclaim this republic by tackling the money and corruption at the heart of the system. And the thing there is that most people are seeing that, but they're seeing it from different angles. People, whether they're black, white, rich, poor, whether they're angry poor whites voting for Trump, or they're Bernie supporters, or they're minorities who've been marginalized for decades. We're all seeing this from different angles. And I think we're speaking different political languages and converging on this as different political and demographic tribes, but we're we're seeing the same picture. And it's almost like a 3D image, and we're honing in on it in different ways, but we're starting to see this convergence across the country, across the American landscape, between, when you look at the Venn diagram overlap between Trump and Bernie Sanders. There's a lot of, these are two very different movements, but there's a lot of overlap between these movements. Oh, yeah. There's a good meme with Occupy and Tea Party where it shows the concentric circles, where the Tea Party says, government has too much power, Occupy says corporations have too much power, and then in the middle, where they overlap, it says corporations lobby government for more power. Right. Or for more rights, and then government enforces it. So they're seeing the same picture. Congress regulates Wall Street, and Wall Street regulates Congress. And these differences are often mediated by brain wiring and neuroscientific differences between liberals and conservatives. There's research on that by a guy named Jonathan Haidt and Chris Moody and all that. We could talk about that forever. But then this is also mediated by nurture and socio-cult, and by just like upbringing and indoctrination. And that's a problem too, because people are often arriving at their platform of views based on groupthink, based on tribalism, based on how they're brought up. So when one person's views on one issue, like abortion or guns, is a predictor of like 5 other totally unrelated issues. When I can look at your views on economics and predict your views on global warming, guns, and war, that's a problem, because if you're a free thinker and you arrive at your views based on an ounce of reasoning and critical thinking, there should be nuanced differences between these different positions. And yet you have millions of people. Let's just take the conservative movement, for example. You have millions of people who coincidentally all share the same platform of views, and they all fucking have the same talking points. And you ask them, do you really believe you arrived at this platform of views all by yourself, and all your millions of friends all happen to arrive at the same fucking platform of views, and they all happen to be polar opposite the liberal side? Do you really think you arrived at this all by yourself, or did this maybe have something to do with bias and brain deception and
tribalism?
Exactly. And the truth is, we've been more polarized than ever. So this election for me is a kind of a tipping point of absurdity and nonsense, where we're so fucking polarized, people are starting to get pissed off, and they'll do anything they can to buck the system. And South Park nailed it when they said a lot of people are voting for Trump not because they're pro-Trump, but because they're so eager to get back in the system.
Right.
That they see Trump as their nuclear weapon they can then redirect and shoot back out.
Right,
But also a lot of them, it's about relatability. They're so jaded by being let down by these politicians that anyone who doesn't talk like a politician and is outside the status quo, no matter how many times he grabs a woman the wrong way, they don't care. They'll stick with this guy because they're so attached. It's like, hey, he talks like me. He doesn't sound like those other politicians.
Yeah.
And this only goes so far. Like, I'm all about, outsiders coming in and disrupting the status quo. I like disruptive innovation. I like creative destruction. I want some asshole to go in there and fucking kick-ass take names and chew bubblegum. I want that. But there's a line of how many lies you tell. And they've analyzed Trump's lies and Hillary's lies. Hillary tells about, I think, an average amount of lies that politicians are expected to tell. It's part of the game. Right? I always say, don't hate the player, hate the game. I wrote a paper about Afghanistan about this too, and we'll go over that another time. But my thing is, yes, I'm not saying Hillary isn't. There's a lot of problems with Hillary. I totally understand. But the thing is, there's a baseline expected level at which politicians lie. Don't hate the player, hate the game. We define the game. We are the voters. A lot of it's our fault. We punish people for being honest, and we reward them for lying. We set the rules. It's almost like if we're in a bar and I'm a woman, you're hitting on me, and I reward certain behaviors, I reward certain, things you do, and then say you're honest with me and I punish you for it, or you're nice to me and I punish you for it by not giving you my phone number. Then you come in, act like your friend comes in, acts like a douchebag Steve, acts like a total asshole, and you see me, taking this number down or going home with him. You're going to then say, you know what? If maybe I should be a little more of an asshole. And then so it's like people. And once again, this is a very loose analogy.
Yeah.
The game itself, the rules of the game are to blame for how to some degree for how people. So, for example, if voters punish politicians for being honest and they reward them for lying because they want to be told what they want to hear, blame the voter for being stupid. Now, that said. That only goes so far. There is a limit to how much we should tolerate people playing this game. There's only so many lies politicians are expected to tell.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not saying any amount of playing this game is okay, and I'm not saying it's all the voters' fault.
Yeah.
Right? So with Trump, they did some fact-check and analysis. The guy tells so many lies in a fucking day or a week. The surgeon, I think it was some sort of surgeon general that literally said if you play a drinking game where you take a shot every time Trump lies, you will die. If you do this during a debate, you will be dead.
Yeah.
Like, you will literally just wrap your head around that. Let that sink into your brain. If you take a shot every time of alcohol, every time Trump lies, you'll be dead.
Yeah.
During a debate, like that is, or some kind of horrible onset will happen to you afterward. Like, you cannot play a drinking game based on Trump's lies, or you'll die.
Yeah.
Like, just wrap your mind around that.
Yeah.
I'm sure it depends on the time of day or whatever, but so I think the thing is we've reached such a tragic point where from the top level the system's so deeply corrupted, And at the bottom level, the bottom up part is how polarized we are, and how fragmented we are, and how unwilling we are to talk to each other, and how we demonize each other, and that enshrines a kind of douchebaggery into the very fabric of our conversations.
Yeah.
Where if I'm a conservative, I'm going to demonize you as being a liberal communist who hates America, and if you're a liberal, you're going to, think that everyone who's at the Tea Party is a racist, and we just have this very in-group out kind of this binary thinking, this us versus them, Sith Lord kind of Anakin Skywalker mindset,
Yeah.
And this is a very problematic. Arguably, we haven't been this polarized since the Civil War or even before it, and there's data to back this up. So, that said, regardless of how people feel about, the data on political polarization, we all agree that we're extremely polarized.
Yeah,
and
that's the one thing we can agree on.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's. I feel that this election is this is a technical military term for it, a clusterfuck. I don't have an answer for it. I mean, I personally think a protest vote's good.
What do you mean by protest vote?
The idea there is that, your vote's not literally going to tip the scales. It's not like my personal vote's going to somehow change it, Voting counts. We have the freedom to vote. People died for a right to vote. Vote however you want. If you vote your conscience, you're not wrong. I think Penn Jillette made this point where he's talking about, he's like, fuck you if you say I have to vote a certain way. I'll vote for, my vote does count even if I vote for a third party because it's a protest vote. You're making a statement. So you could say, well, I don't want to give my vote away. It's like, well, your one vote isn't going to make a difference. What makes a difference is you and thousands of other people making statements. Now,
Yeah, and do you think? I mean, why do you think? Because among veterans, I think that I think Trump is leading among veterans among the last polls I saw, though it can change drastically. But also Gary Johnson is hugely popular among veterans and active soldiers. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that he is so popular?
I wish I looked more into that. I've been tracking Gary Johnson a lot. I'm very interested in the dynamic there. I think so actually I'm not really in a good position to answer that, but I think it's an interesting question to ask. I think a lot of it is people are very jaded by the status quo. I also think veterans, maybe on average tend to lead a little more right, a little more libertarian, self-reliant kind of thing. But they also understand the idea of safety nets. I mean, the military is kind of the optimal hybrid between safety nets and socialism and rugged self-reliance. I mean, you have all of that. You have the biggest elements of kind of rugged self-reliance, but you also have collectivism and take care of your buddy, and you're always going to have kind of a chain of command or a army emergency relief. You're going to have a safety net. The army is the ultimate safety net.
Yeah.
But it's also the ultimate driver of leadership and individual initiative and responsibility. So you get the best of all of that when you're in the military.
Right.
So I think that veterans, a lot of them understand the nuances of these different sides, and it's hard to categorize yourself as belonging to a rigid set of political doctrines on one side. Most people, I think most Americans, tend to have views on both sides. The average, I think Joe Rogan, Chris Rock, like all those people, these comedians, tend to be good at making this point. Like, where most people are kind of have some liberal views and some conservative views. I don't know, and I think the libertarian ideal appeals to a lot of people, to some people, because it's. I don't know, man. I don't want to misspeak or go off anecdotes.
Right.
I know a lot of veterans like guns, but that's not because the stereotypical. Like, there's two different broad categories, I think, of why a lot of people think that people own guns. One of them is the sort of masturbatory need for masculinity and shooting, and you're just like, I just like shooting shit, because I'm blah blah. Yeah. And then there's people that legitimately like shooting. Maybe they're hunters, maybe they're marksmen, or they have military backgrounds, whatever. So they legitimately I fall in that category. I kind of grew up shooting, but I also, for the military, I do a lot of shooting, and I love not just rifles, but I'm a big fan of handguns, actually, pistols. I'm very, very good with a pistol. So I legitimately enjoy that. Do I actually want to go out and start a backyard militia and shoot people? No. don't get me wrong. There are hypothetical thought experiments where that could be a good thing to do. I'm sure that times when militias could be theoretically necessary.
Maybe after this election.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing to talk about too. There's a lot of veterans that are. Now, when I say that, I'm saying theoretically in terms of the observable universe. I'm not saying literally here and now.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think militias.
Hang on one second.